The TSA supervisor laughed when the old baggage handler volunteered to help. "Stay out of the way, Grandpa. This is a job for professionals." But when 3 armed men took control of Terminal B and every trained officer was pinned down, that same supervisor watched in frozen disbelief as the man he'd mocked for 2 years moved with precision that could only come from one place. And suddenly, the 800-yard distance between the tarmac and the control tower became a lot shorter than anyone thought possible. Welcome to Secrets Never Told. Before we begin this story of hidden expertise and impossible shots, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe true heroes often work in silence until the moment demands everything, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who earned their skills in the shadows. Denver International Airport's baggage handling facility hummed with constant motion at 0600 hours. Conveyor belts carried thousands of bags through maze-like corridors while handlers in reflective vests moved between aircraft and terminal. The morning shift had just begun, and the facility buzzed with controlled chaos that defined modern air travel. Jake Morrison had been working this shift for 2 years. At 38, he moved with deliberate efficiency that some mistook for slowness. His sandy blonde hair was cut short, but not military short, and his blue eyes tracked movement with practiced awareness that nobody seemed to notice. The muscular build that had once defined him was still there, hidden beneath loose-fitting work clothes and a slight stoop that made him appear older than his years. "Morrison, you're on Concourse B today," the shift supervisor called out during morning briefing. "Delta and United arrivals should be straightforward." Jake nodded once and headed toward his assigned area without comment. He never said more than necessary, never drew attention, never gave anyone reason to remember him. For 2 years, he'd been exactly what he appeared to be, another middle-aged guy, grateful for steady work with benefits. What nobody at Denver International knew was that Jake Longshot Morrison had spent 15 years as a Navy SEAL sniper. His confirmed kill record included a 2,100-yard shot in Ramadi that remained classified. He'd operated in Iraq, Afghanistan, and places that didn't appear on mission reports. His hands had been steadier than machines, his mind capable of calculating wind, elevation, and Coriolis effect faster than most people could use a calculator. But that was before Kandahar, before the mission that went sideways, before he'd watched his spotter die because of intelligence that turned out to be wrong, before he'd walked away from the only life he'd known, seeking something quieter where his skills wouldn't be needed. The baggage handling job was perfect, physical work that kept him busy without requiring thought. No life or death decision, no targeting calculation, just bags, belts, and routine. His daughter could attend school without security concerns. His ex-wife could stop looking over her shoulder, and Jake could pretend that the muscle memory wasn't still there, waiting. Derek Kane arrived at the TSA checkpoint command post at 0630, coffee in hand and ego fully intact. At 28, he'd risen quickly through TSA ranks by combining genuine competence with aggressive confidence. Tall and athletic with perfect hair and a smile that suggested he knew exactly how good-looking he was, Kane commanded attention in every room he entered. "Morning, team," he announced to the security officers gathered for shift briefing. "We've got intel about increased chatter regarding Western airports. Nothing specific, but Director wants elevated awareness, extra screening on international arrivals, random bag checks on domestic." His team nodded attentively. Kane had a reputation as someone who took security seriously, even if his management style could be abrasive. He demanded excellence and had little patience for what he called airport dead weight, which is exactly how he viewed Jake Morrison. "Morrison's on Concourse B again," Kane asked the operations coordinator. "Guy moves like he's underwater. We've got younger handlers who could do twice the work." The coordinator shrugged. "His numbers are solid, Derek. Never misses a shift. 0 complaints from airline." "Yeah, because he's invisible," Kane replied. "Old guy just putting in time until retirement." What Kane couldn't know was that the man he dismissed had once held a terrorist commander in his crosshairs for 6 hours without moving, waiting for the perfect shot that would eliminate the target without collateral damage. That slow movement was actually tactical efficiency, conserving energy while maintaining perfect situational awareness. At 0847, Jake was loading bags from a Delta flight when he noticed something unusual. 3 men in maintenance uniforms moving through a restricted access corridor that servicing crews rarely used at this hour. Their body language was wrong, too purposeful, too tactical. Jake paused for half a second, his trained eye catching details others would miss. The way they moved in formation, how their eyes constantly scanned rather than focusing on tasks. The slight bulge under one man's uniform that suggested body armor rather than tools. He returned to loading bags without breaking rhythm, but his mind had shifted into a different mode, the mode he'd tried to leave behind. His breathing remained steady, but internally, he was cataloging exits, sight lines, and potential defensive positions. Probably nothing. Security contractors, private maintenance crew, dozen innocent explanations. But Jake had learned in 15 years of combat operations that probably nothing was how good men died. At 0903, the first explosion shattered the morning routine. The blast came from the restricted maintenance corridor Jake had observed earlier, triggering immediate lockdown protocols throughout Terminal B. Alarms blared as security barriers dropped and TSA officers rushed toward the incident. Jake was near the baggage claim carousel when it happened, close enough to feel the concussion through the floor. His body reacted before his mind fully processed what was occurring. Drop, assess, identify, cover. The responses were automatic, burned into neural pathways through thousands of hours of training. Around him, civilians panicked, screaming, running, pushing toward exits that were already sealing. Jake moved against the flow, positioning himself behind a concrete support pillar where he could observe without being exposed. Through the chaos, he heard gunfire, not the random shooting of amateurs, but controlled bursts from experienced operators. 3 separate firing positions, coordinated suppression. This wasn't terrorism for attention. This was a tactical operation. His radio crackled with desperate transmissions. Shots fired. Terminal B, restricted access corridor. Multiple hostiles. Military-grade weapons. All units respond. TSA-7 is down. Repeat, officer down. We need backup at security checkpoint Delta. They're pushing toward the control tower. Someone stop them before they reach aviation control. Jake's hands weren't shaking. That surprised him. 2 years away from the life, and his body still knew what to do when everything went to hell. Derek Kane was at checkpoint Alpha when the explosion happened, 100 yards from the initial breach. His training kicked in immediately as he coordinated evacuation of the checkpoint area and directed officers toward the threat. All units, form defensive line at Corridor Junction, he commanded through his radio. Do not let them reach the main terminal. Airport police en route. ETA 4 minutes. But 4 minutes might as well be forever when trained operators were moving through your facility with military precision. Kane grabbed his sidearm and moved toward the sound of gunfire, leading 3 TSA officers who looked barely old enough to drink. What he found when he reached the Corridor Junction made his blood run cold. 2 TSA officers down, not moving, shell casings everywhere. And advancing through the smoke came 3 figures in tactical gear, body armor, assault rifles, moving with the coordination of special operations units. Kane fired twice, forcing them into cover, but he knew immediately this was beyond his capability. These weren't ordinary criminals. These were professionals executing a plan with military efficiency. Fall back, he ordered his team. Establish defensive position at the terminal entrance. We hold them there until airport police arrive. But as Kane retreated, coordinating his officers into defensive formation, he realized they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. The attackers weren't trying to escape. They were advancing toward a specific target, the airport control tower that managed all air traffic for one of America's busiest hubs. If they reached aviation control, they could down aircraft, cause mass casualties, create chaos that would ripple through the entire national air system. Jake heard the tactical situation deteriorating through radio chatter. TSA was pinned down. Airport police were still 3 minutes out, and the attackers were 60 seconds from reaching their objective. He looked down at his hand. Steady, always steady. Then he looked at the distance between his current position and the tarmac access point that would give him sight lines to the control tower approach. Maybe 200 yards of running through corridors he knew by heart. Every instinct screamed at him to stay hidden, to let the professionals handle it. His daughter was safe at school. His ex-wife was safe at home. Walking away wouldn't make him a coward. It would make him smart. But people were dying, and he had skills that could stop it. Jake moved. He didn't run like a panicked civilian. He moved with tactical efficiency, using cover, checking corners, advancing through the facility like he was clearing a hostile building. His baggage handler vest came off, revealing a lean, muscular frame. His posture straightened, the artificial stoop disappearing as years of elite training reasserted themselves. The maintenance office was locked, but Jake knew where they kept the spare key. Inside, he found what he needed, the facility master key that would access restricted areas, including the equipment storage on the upper level of the terminal. As he moved through corridors that were supposed to be in lockdown, his mind was calculating distances, wind conditions, and shot difficulty. The control tower was 800 yards from the tarmac observation platform. Elevated target, probably 30 degrees above horizontal. Light crosswind from the west, maybe 8 knots. Temperature 55 degrees. Impossible shot for anyone except someone who'd spent 15 years taking impossible shots. He reached the equipment storage level and found what he was looking for. Maintenance crews kept everything here, including tools for high-altitude exterior work. Among them was exactly what Jake needed. It wasn't a sniper rifle. It was a surveying instrument used for measuring distances on the vast airport property. But the precision optics were military grade, and mounted on its tripod was a laser laser designator that maintenance used for alignment checks. Jake's hands moved with practiced efficiency, setting up the equipment with modifications only someone with his training would know how to make. Through the scope, he could see the control tower approach. 3 figures moving with tactical precision, TSA officers pinned behind inadequate cover, and Derek Kane exposed on the tarmac, trying to establish a firing position. Jake's breathing slowed automatically. Heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the scope, the target, and the calculation. 800 yards, 30-degree elevation, 8-knot crosswind from 270. Target moving at approximately 3 feet per second. Then his radio crackled with Derek Kane's voice, desperate and disbelieving. "Morrison? Jake Morrison from baggage handling? What the hell are you doing up here?" Kane had spotted him through the observation window, trying to process why a slow-moving baggage handler was setting up surveying equipment during an active shooter situation. Jake didn't answer immediately. He was busy with calculations that would determine whether people lived or died in the next 60 seconds. Finally, without looking away from his optics, Jake spoke in a voice that Derek Kane had never heard before. Not the quiet, deferential tone of a baggage handler, but the calm, authoritative voice of someone who'd commanded life-and-death situation. "Derek, I need you to trust me and do exactly what I say. In 30 seconds, those 3 targets will be at the control tower entrance. When I give the signal, you're going to provide suppressing fire from your current position. You won't hit them, but you'll force them into a specific formation. Then you're going to get down and stay down." Kane stared through the window, his mind struggling to reconcile the man he'd dismissed with the operator who'd just given him tactical instructions with absolute confidence. "Morrison, what are you?" 15 years, Navy SEAL sniper, Jake interrupted. "Team 3, then development group. Classified operations across 7 countries. Longest confirmed kill, 2,100 yards, Ramadi, 2011. I know you don't believe me, but in 20 seconds, people are going to die unless you do exactly what I'm telling you." The certainty in Jake's voice cut through Kane's disbelief. "What signal?" Kane asked, making his decision. "You'll know," Jake replied. Through his modified optics, Jake watched the 3 hostile men advance on the control tower. His breathing had slowed to 4 breaths per minute. His heart rate barely elevated despite the adrenaline. This was the state his instructors had called the zone, the place where elite snipers lived when making shots that physics said shouldn't be possible. But Jake wasn't holding a rifle. He was holding a modified laser designator, and what he was about to attempt would have seemed impossible even to other snipers. The lead hostile reached the control tower entrance, his 2 companions flanking him in formation. Through standard tactics, they were essentially invulnerable at this range with body armor and disciplined movement. Jake pressed the designator activation. The high-powered laser beam, invisible to the naked eye, struck the lead hostile's night vision goggles that he'd flipped up onto his helmet. The sudden concentrated energy caused the electronics to overload with a flash, bright enough to temporarily blind anyone looking directly at it. The hostile flinched, his hand going to his eyes instinctively. His 2 companions, trained to respond to threats against their team leader, both turned toward him. "Now!" Jake said into his radio. Derek Kane opened fire from his position, controlled 3-round bursts that forced the hostiles into defensive positions. What happened next would be analyzed by law enforcement and military instructors for years to come. Jake had calculated that the laser designator, if focused precisely, could superheat specific points on the hostiles' weapons. He couldn't fire bullets across 800 yards, but he could deliver concentrated thermal energy to the exact point where modern assault rifles had a critical vulnerability, the gas tube that cycled the weapon's action. 3 more laser pulses, each lasting less than a second, each placed with surgical precision on components smaller than a dime at 800 yards distance. The first hostile's rifle jammed as its gas tube failed. The second hostile's weapon suffered the same catastrophic malfunction. The third, realizing something was systematically disabling their weapons, looked around for the source of the attack. That moment of confusion was all airport tactical response needed. Within 30 seconds, all 3 hostiles were in custody, disarmed and neutralized. Derek Kane stood on the tarmac, his weapon still raised, his mind trying to process what had just happened. He'd seen a baggage handler accomplish what an entire TSA unit couldn't manage. He slowly lowered his sidearm and looked up at the observation level where Jake Morrison was already dismantling the equipment with the same quiet efficiency he brought to loading baggage. The airport remained in lockdown for another hour while law enforcement cleared the facility. Jake had disappeared back into the maintenance corridors before anyone could question him, returning to the baggage area where he resumed his assigned duties as if nothing had happened. But Derek Kane found him there at 11:47, accompanied by airport police and an FBI special agent who'd arrived to take over the investigation. "Mr. Morrison," the FBI agent began, his tone respectful in a way that suggested he'd already run Jake Jake's name through databases that confirmed his service record. "We need to ask you some questions about what happened this morning." Jake looked up from the bag he was loading. "Not sure what you mean. I stayed in the baggage area during the lockdown like we're supposed to." The FBI agent glanced at Derek Kane. "Sir, we have security footage of you accessing restricted areas. TSA Supervisor Kane says you provided tactical support." Jake continued loading bags. "Sounds like Derek had a stressful morning. Probably saw things that didn't make sense." "Morrison," Kane finally spoke, his voice different now, lacking the dismissive edge it had carried for 2 years. "I know what I saw. I know what you did. And I know I've spent 2 years treating you like you were invisible." Jake paused, setting down the bag he was holding. When he looked at Kane, there was no anger, no judgment, just a weariness that came from carrying secrets too heavy to share. "Derek, you did your job this morning. You put yourself between civilians and armed hostile. You made command decisions under fire. That takes courage most people don't have." He picked up another bag. "What I did doesn't matter, because officially, I wasn't there." The FBI agent stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mr. Morrison, your service record is flagged at the highest levels. When I ran your name, I got a call back from Naval Special Warfare Command within 4 minutes. They want to know if you're compromised, if your position has been exposed." Jake's expression didn't change. "Tell them Jake Morrison is exactly where he needs to be, loading bags at Denver International, taking care of his daughter, living a quiet life." "You saved lives today," Kane said, still struggling with the disconnect between the man he'd dismissed and the operator who'd just neutralized a terrorist threat. "TSA saved lives today," Jake corrected. "You saved lives. The officers who advanced under fire saved lives. I just helped with a technical equipment issue. That's my job. I handle equipment." The FBI agent studied Jake for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "The official report will reflect that TSA tactical response neutralized the threat with support from airport security systems." "Appreciated," Jake said simply. As the FBI agent walked away, Derek Kane remained, watching Jake return to his work. "Why?" Kane finally asked. "Why work here? You could be training SWAT teams, consulting for security companies, making 10 times what baggage handlers earn." Jake was quiet for a moment, then spoke without stopping his work. "Because I spent 15 years looking through scopes at people I was about to kill. And one day, I looked through that scope and realized I didn't know how to be anything except the man pulling the trigger." He paused, meeting Kane's eyes. "My daughter deserves a father who's present. My ex-wife deserves not to worry that someone from my past is going to show up at her door. And I deserve to find out if Jake Morrison can be something other than Longshot." Kane understood then. This wasn't about hiding. It was about healing. "For what it's worth," Kane said quietly, "I'm sorry. For 2 years of disrespect. For assuming that because you moved slowly, you had nothing to offer." Jake offered a slight smile, the first Kane had ever seen from him. "You treated me exactly like I wanted to be treated. Invisible, forgettable, just another guy doing a job." He picked up another bag. "But today, I needed to be something else for a few minutes. Tomorrow, I'll go back to being invisible, and that's okay." Derek Kane nodded slowly, then extended his hand. Not a handshake between supervisor and employee, but between two men who'd stood together when everything went wrong. Jake shook it firmly. "Your team did good today, Derek." They responded under fire. They held the line. That's leadership. As Kane walked away, Jake returned to his work, but something had changed. The baggage handlers who'd worked alongside him without really seeing him now watched with different awareness. Word spread quietly through the airport community. TSA officers who'd responded to the crisis began nodding to Jake when they passed. Airport police officers greeted him by name. A week after the incident, Jake was loading bags from a morning Delta flight when Derek Kane approached. "Got a minute, Morrison?" Kane asked, his tone professional but respectful. Jake set down the bag he was holding and turned his attention to Kane. "TSA is implementing new active shooter response protocols," Kane explained, "developing training programs for staff on tactical awareness and emergency response. Director wants someone with real-world experience to consult on the program." He paused. "The pay is supplemental, wouldn't affect your current position, and it's all classified under security training protocols. No public profile, no attention." Jake considered the offer carefully. 2 years ago, he would have refused instantly, but this morning, he'd proven to himself that you couldn't run from who you were. You could only decide how to use it. "3 conditions," Jake finally said. "First, my name doesn't appear on any official documents. Second, the focus is on survival and de-escalation, not turning TSA officers into tactical operators. And third, my schedule still allows me to pick up my daughter from school every day at 3. That's non-negotiable." Kane nodded. "Done. Training sessions can be scheduled around your family time. And Morrison, thank you for what you did last week and for teaching me that job titles don't measure worth." That evening, when Jake picked up his 7-year-old daughter from school, school. She ran to him with unbridled enthusiasm. "Dad, we learned about community helpers today," she announced. "What do you do again?" Jake smiled. "I help make sure people's things get where they need to go. Important stuff that has to travel safely." "That's important," she said with absolute certainty. "Because what if someone needed their stuff and it got lost?" "That's right, sweetie," Jake replied. "I make sure important things don't get lost." 6 months later, Denver International implemented sophisticated security training protocols developed by an anonymous consultant. TSA officers learned threat assessment techniques that saved lives. Airport staff understood tactical awareness in ways that prevented incidents before they escalated. And every morning at 0600, Jake Morrison arrived at the baggage handling facility, clocked in, and did the job that let him be present for his daughter, invisible to those who didn't know better, and exactly where he needed to be. Derek Kane never again dismissed someone based on job title or appearance. The lesson he'd learned, that true capability often operates in silence until the moment demands everything, became something he carried throughout his career. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody notices. Sometimes the hero is the guy loading bags in Concourse B who moves a little slowly because he's conserving energy for the moment when 800 yards becomes the difference between tragedy and survival. Jake Longshot Morrison never spoke about his past, never sought recognition. He simply loaded bags, picked up his daughter from school, and lived a life that proved you could be extraordinary by choosing to be ordinary. Have you ever met someone whose quiet competence hid capabilities most people couldn't imagine? Someone who served without seeking credit, who protected without demanding recognition? Share their story in the comments below. At Secrets Never Told, we believe the most powerful service often happens in silence, until the moment demands everything they have to give.